like we lived in a very strict household. Like to pick, take me and my sisters on a date. Like you had to come inside. Like that back in the day, 90s stuff where I'm gonna blow my horn and you're gonna come outside.
Permission, the whole nine.
Child, I would tell boys in advance, like, let me tell you something. You pull up that car in front of my house and blow your horn, we ain't going nowhere. Because I won't even be able to come, I won't even be allowed to come to the door if that happens, So it was, I lived this very interesting, old, worldly life because I was raised by like really, really old people. Not even just like my parents, but like all my aunts and uncles are like born in their 20s, 30s, and my mom's born in 46. Everybody's born in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. My grandmother, who's born, she was said 19 and 14. She was alive until I was 20. So she was something else. Wow. God, don't leave you with something else. But so even the men in my life, my uncles who own a cab stand on the west side of Chicago and all of this, all the men around me are very old school.
I mean, that's old school. She said cab stand.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. We're me and my cousins are trying to get the cab stand back now because we were like that was a loss for the family because they had that cab stand for like 60 years. But so I just lived like such a I won't even say sheltered, but like old worldly life. So yeah, I was super fascinated with what was going on across the tracks.
Yeah.
Super fascinated because I'm around people who still make their clothes.
Right. I bet you know how to sew too.
I do know how to sew.
So do I. Yeah,
I do know how to sew.
All my aunts sewed, and they went through because growing up when they grew up,
crochet and quilt and all that stuff.
Yeah, and when they grew up,
But do you call them trousers?
I do.
That's trousers.
I use a lot of old school words. Like people laugh at me all the time because I say things like pocketbook and billfold, and somebody get in a fight. I call my sister. I say I was at this party. They got the tussling.
Right. So at what point in your life did you just say, I'm not going to bother with the King's English and just be?
When I discovered Zora Neale Hurston. When I discovered Zora, and I loved the language that she put on the page and the way that it flowed, and it felt like syrup to me, like an elixir.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is absolutely beautiful. And then when I started to research her and realized that she was
a cultural anthropologist.
Yeah, she just like they hated her.
Yeah.
Like she was really emotionally abused for the way that she wrote. And it just hurt my heart to know that she like died penniless and thinking that she was unsuccessful and was in an unmarked grave until other authors went and bought her headstone and all of this. And I was like, why? And some of our favorites, some of the ones that we love from the Harlem Renaissance, they really were mean to her.
Is Zora, she's down in Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was like either Toni Morrison or Alice Walker, one of them paid to get her a headstone.
Yeah.
But yeah, like she was really brutalized for the language that she used. And for me, when I grew up and I would hear girls in my neighborhood create language, and then I would hear it on MTV 5 years later, late, right? Before we had the internet, by the time it became mainstream, it would be something we weren't even saying anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I would hear it late, and I watched how, as these like magnificent hood peacocks was creating this language, we told them that it was remedial, and then it became cultural, and then it became bankable. And that bothered me.
And then it became pop.
Yeah, then it becomes pop.
Yeah.
And it's like, but even like now when you think about like nail art, how now this is part of pop culture, but when girls were wearing it, it was ghetto, it was trash, it was this, it was that. And it was just like everything that we create at the onset of our creation is demonized, and then it becomes popularized, and then it becomes monetized, but not by us. And I just didn't like that. I didn't like that.
And, now we find ourselves still in a situation. I mean, it happened more in the 80s. I was looking at your hair earlier, and I said, what are we're growing out those sister locks. They say that with a black woman and their hair, you could just tell the story, right?
Yeah,
So there's always a big story behind
There
it.
is.
So if I saw you in high school before the cotillion, I'd have known there was a story. Like there was some havoc and chaos going on in your house.
For sure.
Yeah, but so I look at your hair now, I said, oh, she's growing out her sister locks. Now, some people may not even understand that language who are not like us. Like we understand that process.
Yeah.
But that is something that I know Black women and Black men, deal with all the time. How do I negotiate my hair? Because I know that it's something that people will fear because they do not know it. And that happened to me a lot, but I'm not sure if that happened to you, and I'm trying to figure it out along your journey.
Yeah, I listen. I am a stark follower of certain people who influence me, especially on my social justice journey. And of course, growing up in Chicago, Fred Hampton is,
D. Fred Hampton.
And I always love how the Panthers were very specific about everything that they did down to the fashions.
Yes.
They wore certain clothes as rebellion. They wore their hair as a form of rebellion. They had an in-house artist who made, was like what we would call a graphic designer now. They had in-house writers. You're starting the food program that now the school system has mimicked. Like just how specific they were about everything. And I'm like, everything that we, especially us, unfortunately, in this country, like everything about us is a statement.
Yeah.
And so I always think about, like, instead of being burdened by that, I'd rather use it as a tool. Like, okay, I could see this as a burden, that everything that I say, that I do, that I wear, how I wear my hair, what I, what kind of car I choose to drive, like all of that can potentially be weaponized against me. It's like, it's chess, not checkers. So how do I want to play it? That's how I take back my power. It's like, I won't wait for you to make determinations for me. I will use these tools as I move against you.